Most entrepreneurs think the hardest part of their business is marketing, sales, or strategy. But what many entrepreneurs don't realize is that they're often building their business while carrying unprocessed grief. Not just the grief from losing someone, but grief from attachment wounds that started long before there was ever an idea to launch a business. Today, I want to talk about how grief from unmet attachment needs show up in entrepreneurship and why processing it is essential if you want to run your business from a grounded place instead of pain. Many entrepreneurs are moving through life in business experiencing grief without even realizing what it is. They might call it stress. They might even call it burnout. They might think they just need to push harder and develop a stronger mindset. But sometimes what they are actually experiencing is the unprocessed grief from an attachment wound. Grief from the relationship that they needed but didn't receive. Grief from emotional needs that went unmet. And that grief doesn't just disappear because we grow up. It simply changes how it shows up. Sometimes it shows up in our relationships, sometimes it shows up in our business. Grief isn't one experience. There are different ways grief can show up. The first is common grief. This is usually what people think of when they think about the word grief. A loss happens, we feel the pain immediately, and over time we gradually process it and feel it a little bit less. Then there's chronic or complicated grief. This is a grief that lingers because it hasn't been fully processed. It can show up repeatedly over time and feel like you are stuck in this same emotional cycle. There is then delayed grief. Sometimes we don't process the loss right away. Life keeps moving and we only realize the impact of the loss much later. And then there is something called ambiguous loss, which is very common with attachment wounds. So this can happen when someone is physically present in your life but emotionally unavailable. So for example, a parent who was there physically but not emotionally attuned. So technically you had a parent, but your attachment needs still went unmet. And that creates a type of grief that can only really be confusing because there wasn't a clear loss, but something important was still missing. When people begin to process attachment wounds, they often move through stages of grief. So the first stage of grief is denial. So this could look something like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I've already moved on from that. It doesn't really affect me anymore. And it's really kind of minimizing or downplaying what you've experienced. And then there's anger, frustration about what you didn't receive, irritability, sometimes anger towards the people who were unable to meet those needs. And then there's bargaining. This is the stage where people start thinking, what if I had done something different? What if I tried harder? What if I could somehow make things go back to how they were supposed to be? This stage can be tricky when there are some level of access to the relationship. For example, if a business partner relationship ends and someone experiences hardship after, they may want to try to reconnect without fully acknowledging why the relationship ended in the first place. So they may get back together and form a partnership only just to still experience some of that grief because, well, there was a reason why the relationship wasn't working out. Then there's sadness. This is where people begin to fully feel the weight of the loss, the absence of what they needed. That I've tried all the bargaining, all the anger and frustration, I've tried denying, and nothing gets me away from the realization that this loss has really occurred. Sometimes this comes with feelings of hopelessness or uncertainty about what the future looks like. And then finally, there is the acceptance stage. Acceptance doesn't mean that the loss didn't matter. It means you begin to see what life can look like in absence of what was lost. Unprocessed grief often shows up in entrepreneurship in subtle ways. So some entrepreneurs overwork constantly because success becomes a way to feel worthy. Others chase validation through social media engagement, certifications, or achievements. Some entrepreneurs even avoid commitment to one business idea because commitment can feel risky. Others become overly accommodating with clients because rejection just feels too painful. When attachment wounds haven't been processed, business decisions often come from pain instead of intention. Processing grief allows you to make decisions from the person you were today rather than from the version of you that is still carrying that unresolved pain. It allows you to acknowledge what you didn't receive while also learning how to meet those needs in healthier ways. This is how entrepreneurs move from reacting out of old pain to leading themselves intentionally. And when you lead yourself, you can lead your business in a much more grounded and sustainable way. Entrepreneurship is not just a professional journey, it is also a deeply personal one. The work we do in business often brings us face to face with parts of ourselves that were shaped long before we ever even opened our first business account. Processing grief from attachment wounds doesn't weaken you as an entrepreneur, it actually can make you stronger. Because when you process the grief, you are no longer running your business from a wounded version of yourself. You are running it from a healed version of you that can lead with clarity, intention, and confidence. If this is something that resonated with you, I invite you to reflect on this question. What losses from your past might still be influencing how you show up in your business today? In next week's video, we're going to talk about reparenting and how entrepreneurs can begin meeting their own attachment needs moving forward.